Hey guys, I'm Philip Wilder and I'm here with this adorable little plant and two not very plant-friendly lighters, and I'm going to share with you guys an important lesson on how we can avoid getting burned like this cute little plant. So let's get to it. So we're going to be looking at James chapter 1 verses 13 through 17. It says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." So it says very clearly here that God is not the one who brings about temptation. Yes, God can test us, but God doesn't tempt us. So then where do these temptations come from? And I think there's a few important places that temptations come from. First and foremost, I think temptations come from a source of pride. We are too proud of who we are, and because we're too proud, we want to go our way rather than God's way, or we care about our things rather than other people. So one way that this could really manifest is in the case of theft. You don't care about the person you're stealing from, so you're okay with hurting them and then giving yourself this thing for free because it's advantageous for you to steal that thing, even though it hurts somebody else. You don't care about that person. All you're caring about is yourself. In the same way, you're going to follow your way rather than God's way because you don't care about following God, and you don't think God knows what's best because you ultimately know what's best. Another way that we can really slip into temptation is simply by not practicing self-control. We get these sinful temptations and sinful urges all the time. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I would encourage you to think back to when you were a younger boy or girl, whatever, and talking or arguing with your brother and sister, if you have a sibling or maybe a friend. I'm sure there was at least one point in time when you were so mad at them that you just wanted to punch them, or you wanted to kick them or bite them, whatever it was. You just wanted to do this bad thing because ultimately in our hearts we desire bad things. And again, that comes kind of out of a place of pride where we care more about ourselves and we want to avenge ourselves by hurting somebody else. But ultimately, if we don't have self-control, then we can't resist these temptations and these urges to hurt somebody else. Another big way that we can really fall into temptation is when we stop trusting God. For example, God might be calling you to something that you're really excited about, but after 5 years of working towards it, it's just not happening. And so you short circuit it. Or maybe God promises, as he does promise in the Bible, that when we follow him, we'll be full of joy, peace, and love. Well, there's times when you just don't feel those emotions. So instead of seeking after his peace, we then want to bring in pleasure through some other means, and that might be a sinful mean. And so instead of waiting for God's timing, waiting for God to provide the things that we need or want, we then turn to try and get it out of our own means, out of our own strength. And one way that we can see this is in the metaphor of plants. Imagine this plant, he wants to grow big and strong, and so he's reaching up to the sun, trying to get nutrients from the sun and energy from the sun. It's a good thing for a plant to do. But there are times when the sun sets. Well, in that time, most plants, they just wait, and they wait for the sun to come up again, just like we should wait for God and just simply follow God through the dark times. But if this plant, it's not waiting for God or waiting for the sun to come back, and it sees this other source of light, maybe it's not as bright, but this light's shining all the time, and it's always available to it if it just simply reaches out toward it, and it promises to give the plant what it wants. This plant might start growing closer to the light rather than growing closer to the sun. And it might not feel any pain or might not feel any different, and it might seem like everything's going just fine for a little while, but the closer it grows to this false source of light, the more it's going to hurt the plant, and eventually it'll start causing destruction to this plant. And so we shouldn't be like this plant. We shouldn't succumb to these sinful temptations and think, oh, everything's going to be all right. This actually isn't all that bad. Maybe God was lying to me when he said that I shouldn't do this thing because he just didn't want me to experience this good thing. Or maybe God doesn't truly know what he's talking about when he says that we should avoid this sort of thing. Well, in the end, we'll end up getting burned like this poor little plant. Now, of course, I don't want this for you guys, and I'm sure you don't want to end up burnt like this little plant either. So we need to make sure that we are avoiding temptation and not following temptation, because just like it says here in verse 15, then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death, just as what we saw happen to this poor little plant right here. Well, in the same way, we should be avoiding temptation, sinful desires, and sin itself as well too. How can we do that? Well, I think there's 3 good ways that we can do it. And the first is we can actively be humble. We can take steps to care about the people around us or focus more on God. The less we focus on ourselves, the more humble we will be and the more we will care about others. And that will ultimately protect us from a whole bunch of sin. Additionally, we can practice self-control or put things in our way whenever we know that there's a sinful tendency that we always go towards when there's something hard or difficult in our lives. We can set up barriers to protect us from that, maybe accountability partners, but ultimately we should be practicing self-control in the little and in the big things so that when these urges come, we have the strength to resist them. Another good and important way that we can avoid falling into temptation is to ultimately trust God, to turn towards God, read his word, and just see how good he is so that we remember how good God is so that we can then avoid these difficult seasons and these difficult temptations. Well, I hope this was a big encouragement to you. If you have asked Jesus to come into your life and save you from your sins, I would encourage you to share the gospel with others because ultimately we don't have the strength to resist these temptations on our own. Additionally, you can share this video with your friends or just encourage your friends and point your friends back towards God. If you haven't asked Jesus to come into your life, I would strongly encourage you to seek him out. See if he really is true because he's the only one who can free you from these addictions or these sinful temptations. Thank you again so much for watching. Please consider liking or subscribing to our YouTube channel. I'm Philip Wilder, and have a great day.